I'm Brianna.
And I'm Dee Dee.
The famous social activist success in achieving racial equality. Statistics of how racism within the 21st century state that 43% of African Americans are doubtful that the country will ever make the changes needed for blacks to have equal rights as whites. Throughout the social and political changes that have occurred within the United States of America, the civil rights movement during the 1960s since had an everlasting effect on the country. Many popular social activists had to make huge sacrifices to make sure that future generations would not have to go through what they endured. One social activist that had a major impact on the African Americans' equality was Martin Luther King Jr. Since the United States outlawed slavery in 1863, there had been an endless clash between the races of people who live within the United States. Many minority rights were violated on a constant basis purely because of the color of the skin of a person's skin. Martin Luther King Jr.'s main goal that he wanted to accomplish was making sure that all minorities, particularly African Americans, were racially equal regardless of their skin color. Which he was able to accomplish that goal through all his notable achievements, but we still continue to suffer from racial inequality to this very day. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister and social activist who played a major role in the American Civil Rights Movement. He was born on January 15, 1923 in Atlanta, Georgia. King was the first son and the second child born to Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. Martin Luther King Jr. earned a sociology degree from Morehouse College in 1943. He attended college when he was 15 years old. MLK was famous for using non-violent resistance to overcome African Americans' injustice in the United States. King's ultimate goal during the Civil Rights Movement was to raise the public awareness of racism in the country after the end of slavery, and which eventually end racial discrimination and segregation in the United States. His leadership was fundamental to that specific movement's success in ending legal separation of minorities, especially blacks. With his help from a series of nonviolent protests, he helped pass the Civil Rights Act of 1963 and the Voting Rights of 1965. Mr. King had made several contributions to the Civil Rights Movement and will forever be remembered for his attributions. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4, 1963 in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King Jr. had many notable characteristics and several achievements that have severely impacted this great country. Throughout Martin Luther King Jr.'s lifetime, he participated in several nonviolent protests, such as the Birmingham Campaign, which was a boycott local business who supported legal segregation of whites and blacks, or simply during the sit-ins in restaurants in places that were not kind enough at that time. One top achievement was the Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, which is where he first attracted national attention in 1955. He was arrested because he refused to give up his seat to a Caucasian citizen. During that time, African Americans were required to give non-whites their seats and stand or sit in the back of the bus. In this particular peaceful protest, his case which eventually led to the Supreme Court, which ruled segregated buses unconstitutional. Another accomplishment was the March on Washington, which occurred on August 26, 1963 in Washington, D.C. Over 250,000 people attended this event. Martin Luther King Jr. presented his historical I Have a Dream speech, where his ultimate goal was to end racism in the states. This speech was very crucial to passing the Civil Rights Law Act, which was eventually passed in 1964. Another big accomplishment was a Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Mr. King was the first president of that organization. The organization was founded in order to support these nonviolent protests in the country for equality. They originally started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to focus on inequality on the transportation system, which eventually expanded to end all forms of segregation between Caucasians and minorities. As you can see, Martin Luther King Jr. made many attributions to the United States, who not only affected his day and time, but the future for minorities, mainly African Americans, in receiving equality in their own country. The famous line in his I Have a Dream speech was, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in the nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." This particular sentence in that speech was the basis of why he did everything for this country, and not why all African Americans should give thanks to that man, because he sacrificed at times his freedom, the life of his family, and eventually his life, so that all God's children will have equality and not be judged because of the color of their skin. Although African Americans still endure racial problems in the 21st century, we are just as lucky we didn't have to deal with it like our ancestors.